What's everybody? Welcome back. Another installment of Lifelong Rivals podcast here with me, Ryan D'Amico, and as always, Zach Hoffman. What's going on, Zach?
Hey, it's good to be back, man.
Absolutely. Already on our third one, pretty crazy. We're definitely moving right along here. The last two podcasts we covered the NFL. First the AFC, last week we did the NFC. So that's wrapped up now. So we're going to transition into college football. We got our college football preview here today. Basically what we're going to do, just a quick overview of what to look forward to in this installment. Basically we're just going to touch briefly on the top 25 to get us started here on the initial AP poll. And then we'll go through basically and break down each Power 5 conference. We'll go through the Big Ten, we'll go through the SEC, we'll go through the ACC, Big 12, and the Pac-12 conferences. So we'll touch on some teams to watch, some players to watch. I know you're excited. You got some players that you really want to talk about, and for people to keep their eye on. So, so that's what we got in store for today. Anything you want to add before we get started?
We both one of the things I'm excited about this is we both have entirely different perspectives here when it comes to college football. If you didn't notice in the NFC and AFC previews, Ryan has a crazy in-depth knowledge when it comes to college football. He was bringing up all kinds of stuff he remembered from different specific players, and it's going to be the same thing. For me, I haven't been a huge fan when it comes to college football. I like seeing the players that are coming up to the NFL, so I'll be focusing more on that while Ryan spends more time discussing some of the teams and some of the dynamics there. He might get into some of the rivalries, things like that. That's things I'm not as concerned, but I'm excited to see the future of the NFL and where it's going with a lot of these teams and players.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a great point there, Zach. Definitely going to be exciting here to talk about some college, just kind of a different perspective here than the initial first two podcasts. So we'll get started here. Basically, just to take a quick look at the AP Top 25 was released just about a little over a week ago. And kind of as always, the last handful of years, Alabama starts off the year number one. They receive all but looks like 9 first-place votes. So pretty overwhelmingly, they are the number one team to start the year, followed by the Ohio State Buckeyes, Florida State Seminoles, USC Trojans, and Clemson Tigers to round out the top 5. Now, when I look at that, Zach, one thing that stands out to me is obviously the top 3 teams, they are kind of expected to be mainstays there this year, maybe even top 4 with USC. Clemson to me is an interesting team, and we'll talk about that a little later, just because of all the talent they lost. I mean, I'm sure you can relate. You know, you're seeing Deshaun Watson and Mike Williams and players like that have come to the NFL. So it's going to be interesting to see how they replace that kind of talent.
Yeah, it's very, very true. That's always tough, replacing players, having the next guy step up and seeing what comes there. I'm in full agreement with you so far with the top 5. I think especially those top 3, very deep, both sides of the ball. All 3 of those teams have Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State. All 3 of them have very exciting players that are probably heading to the NFL very shortly. By next year, you'll see quite a few of them. So I think the top 5 is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. Absolutely. As you get to 6 here with Penn State, a local team, Happy Valley, only about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes away from us here. They have a magical season last year. Go to the Rose Bowl, play that great game against USC where they ultimately lose. But they pretty much bring everyone back for the most part. They come in at number 6. 7 is Oklahoma, 8 Washington, 9 Wisconsin, and 10 Oklahoma State rounds out the top 10 there. So a pretty exciting top 10 there. And then the rest of the teams kind of fall in there to round out the top 25. We're not going to go through each single team to round out the top 25. Just a couple teams I did want to point out in there. Texas, I think that's a joke that they're ranked to start the year. I mean, look, I know they have high expectations this year for the most part. Maybe a little too high in some instances. I mean, this team was 5-7 last year. This team was one of the worst defensive teams in the country last year. I know they do bring a lot back, but still, I think to be ranked inside the top 25 is kind of a bit of a stretch here.
I'm not very excited about Texas either. They're just kind of all right, but I feel like there's a lot of teams kind of in that range that they're not. It's hard to tell. They could go up, they could go down, but Texas kind of fits in towards the end for me. I'm still not real excited, especially about a lot of their position players.
Right. And another team that we actually saw last night play, Zach, South Florida, the Bulls, who were 11-2 last year, they get ranked to start the year number 19. Like I said, they played last night. They traveled to San Jose State. Actually got down 16-0 in that game. End up kind of shaking the rust off and pulling away into the second quarter and then into the second half and end up winning by 20. But that's kind of eye-opening to me that they kind of struggled a little bit. A lot of people who think this is a team that can run the table and ultimately get to a New Year's Six bowl game. So that was kind of interesting to see them struggle a little bit. It'll be interesting to see them going forward to as they continue to march on here.
So do you expect them to be better than that ranking this year?
It's interesting because they should have. I mean, we saw what Stanford did last night to Rice. They won, I think, by like 60 points. They won like 67-7, if I remember correctly. They scored. I kind of expected the same almost thing from USF last night. They should have won by more than 20. They really should have. Look, I get it. First game. You're still kind of incorporating some new guys in there and stuff. I get that. But against a San Jose State team who is nothing special, you need to go in there and kind of lay the smackdown, set the tone early. So they're fortunate that their schedule is not too tough. So that is fortunate for them. I do think they definitely get to 10 or 11 wins. So I think that was just kind of a hiccup last night. But I do think that they will be good as the season goes on.
And I got another quick shout out there. I know you said about Happy Valley, Penn State being a local team here from Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. I got another shout out on the Virginia side, which is where I live now.
There you go.
I'd love to get down and see a game for Virginia Tech. There's quite a few schools in the Virginia area, but they're clearly the top one. I actually had a cousin that just headed there. She's about to start her freshman year. So I'd love to see them play. I'm excited for that team and see what they can do to represent Virginia.
Have you ever been to a Vatech game before?
I have not.
You should try to get down there because, I mean, I've never been there, but just it's well known as one of the better venues and better atmospheres in college football, and especially their patented like Thursday night games that they play throughout the year. It's rocking. They come out to Enter Sandman. Like it's really a cool environment. So if you can definitely hit one of them games up, Zach, definitely do it because it really sounds like everyone says it's a cool environment.
I love the recommendation, man. I'll have to look out for that.
And they should have a decent year this year as well. I mean, you touched on Vatech. They start the year ranked 21st, so they're going to be battling it out with Miami there in the coastal side of the ACC, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So we touched on the top 25 rankings there. We got that out of the way. Now we're going to transition into our conference breakdowns here, and we'll start with the Big Ten, which is the local flavor, has some of the local teams around us in the conference, most importantly Penn State, which I know a lot of people around this area do tend to follow. So with the Big Ten, Zach, it's kind of a you could say four-team race with Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan being in the Eastern Division of the conference, and then Wisconsin being in the Western Division. It's going to be exciting, man, to see Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan battle it out this year, because really those are the only three teams on that side that really have a chance to win that division. I mean, we saw Penn State knock off Ohio State last year. We see Michigan beat Penn State, and then we saw Ohio State beat Michigan. So if you have the same kind of thing happen this year, that could really open a can of worms for that side of the division. So what do you like from each of those three teams? Or I guess I could say, what team stands out to you of those three teams?
I really like the top of this conference. Ohio State, I'm just so impressed with their depth. They have quite a few guys. They have 4 guys that could end up being within the first round, maybe even second round of the NFL draft coming up. They've got Sam Hubbard at defensive end, Draymond Jones, defensive tackle, and a third defensive lineman in Tyquan Lewis. That's incredible. That's a huge, impressively good defensive line. And then Jerome Baker's another guy that could be picked in the draft next year. That seems like a very good prospect. So they're very deep on the defensive side of the ball. They should be a fun team to watch. And then one of the players I'm most excited to watch in the country, Saquon Barkley there in Penn State. That should be that should be a successful season for him. I'm excited to see what he can bring. And they've got another guy I'm excited about. Their safety, Marcus Allen.
Okay.
He's someone that
big name to live up to there.
That's very true, very true. But he's at the safety position. I've been a coach of receivers and defensive backs, so that always stands out to me. And he's looked good. I expect that to continue, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
They need big things too from the defense, Zach. So that's fantastic.
True,
you bring that up, a guy on the defensive side of the ball, because that's definitely offensively Penn State's fine. I mean, they know what they're going to do. They bring Masorley back. They bring Saquon Barkley back, who you just touched on. But the big thing is defensively, are they going to be able to stop teams and get stops and not just trying to win these shootouts? Because that's what they're going to need as they face Ohio State, they face Michigan, they face the upper echelon teams in the Big Ten. They're going to need to get stops and kind of separate themselves, not just outscore teams. So and with Ohio State, man, I'll tell you, the way they just reload every year is remarkable. I mean, they're recruiting at such a high level right now. It's almost unfair. I mean, they're just week in and week out bringing in some really good talent, 4-star, 5-star guys. It's basically just a given anymore that they're going to bring in talent. So I mean, last year they lose a ton of guys in the draft. Not a big deal. They're going to be fine. They're going to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten and in the country this year too, so that's not really too big of a concern. With Michigan, obviously, look, they're my favorite team. A lot of people aren't real high on them, and I get that with the fact that they do lose so many starters from last year. They only bring back one quote-unquote starter on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, a little different story. They bring back some pretty key guys in running back Chris Evans, quarterback Wilton Spate. They shuffled the offensive line around a little bit, but they bring in a lot of talent as well, recruiting-wise. So while they are young, they may even be more talented than last year. So Michigan's kind of that X-factor team here in the Big Ten to kind of see what they can do. They have to go to Penn State this year, but they do get Ohio State at home. So they're kind of an X-factor team here in the Big Ten. The fourth team I kind of wanted to touch on, which very briefly is Wisconsin. Zach, they shouldn't have much trouble in the Western Division. I mean, really, the big hitters in this conference are in the East Division with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. The only team that Wisconsin really has to kind of look out for, I would kind of think maybe, is a team like Northwestern. Northwestern's actually a team that I think is going to surprise some people this year. I like what they have in Justin Jackson in the backfield. And some of the other places, their defense is pretty stout. So I like what Northwestern is capable of doing this year. Have a pretty favorable schedule as well. Penn State has to come to Northwestern. I think that's a possible trap game for Penn State. But there's no reason Wisconsin shouldn't be able to kind of just, I don't want to say run the table, maybe lose one. I think they'll lose one game, Wisconsin will, but there's no reason they shouldn't get to the Big Ten title game and represent the Western Division, in the Big Ten title game for the Big Ten championship. So, anything on Wisconsin there, Zach, at all?
You pretty well summed it up there. I don't see anybody else there really standing up to them and competing strongly with them. So I think, just like you were saying, that they are going to stay at the top throughout the season.
Right. The Big Ten is really starting to kind of, it's definitely trending upward, I will say. There were a few years, maybe 5-6 years ago, where the Big Ten was kind of, Michigan was down, Penn State was down. Those teams have kind of flipped the script and are definitely trending upward. So in turn, I think the conference is trending upward. You got teams like Northwestern, Indiana, they're starting to turn a corner here. So it's not as top heavy as some other conferences, like we'll talk about later. I think Big Ten is really kind of, cementing itself as one of the better conferences in college football. As far as some players to watch, that's one thing we're going to do here as we finish with each conference. We'll give you guys out there, we'll touch on some players to watch in this conference, the marquee guys. I know this is kind of where you kind of make your hay here, Zach. So I'll let you kind of lead this off. Give me some players in the Big Ten to keep for these guys to keep their eye on.
So I did mention that tough defensive line on Ohio State. They've got Sam Hubbard. I've even seen him that he could potentially be a top 10 pick.
Okay.
People really like him at the defensive end position. The other two guys would be more late first rounders from what I was saying, maybe early second rounders, the defensive tackle Draymond Jones, and then Tyquan Lewis at defensive end. Another guy I've seen, it's expected he's going to really break out. and could be a higher pick depending how he does this year, would be Paris Campbell at wide receiver.
Okay.
So I'll be very intrigued to see how he does throughout the season. But this is a team I definitely want to watch. They have some high end talent. I will be looking out for some of their games throughout the season to be able to see this team play and see how good this defense is and some of those specific players.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely. I mean, they're definitely a team to definitely keep your eye on all year. Sam Hubbard, obviously, is a name that's been kind of thrown around a lot this offseason. Ohio State actually plays Thursday to open up their season against Indiana. They'll be on ESPN, so a perfect time for people to tune in and check out the number 2 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes to start the year. A couple other guys to keep your eye on. I'll piggyback off Ohio State there. JT Barrett, their quarterback. He seems like he's been there for about 10 years. He'll finally go away and graduate after this year. He's been a thorn in my side as a Michigan fan for some time now. So he's always an exciting player to watch. Dual threat kind of guy, can get it done with the arm and the legs. Running back for Michigan, I think, will take a big step forward in Chris Evans, who wasn't a highly ranked guy coming out of high school. He's from Indiana. He'll, I think, take another step forward this year. He was a freshman last year, really just came onto the scene, surprised a lot of people. And another guy I mentioned briefly when I touched on with Northwestern is running back Justin Jackson. This is one of the better running backs in the country that no one's really heard of. This guy just churns out 1,000-yard seasons year after year after year. And this year, I think he can definitely get over that number and even flirt with 1,300 yards this year. So I like those guys to keep your eye on in the Big Ten. Big Ten definitely going to be a fun and compelling conference to watch this year for sure. So after the Big Ten there, we wrapped up with that. We're going to shift to ESPN's favorite conference, a lot of people's favorite conference. A lot of people say is the best conference or has been the best conference in college football for some time now.
It's the NFL's favorite conference too.
Exactly.
If you want to look at that, there were 53 players drafted from the SEC last year.
Wow.
Easily the most among any conference. And that actually averages out to 3.79 picks per school.
Wow.
So
that's wild.
if you think about the numbers, usually it's a small percentage, around 1%, that make it to the NFL. And this conference here is putting out the majority of those players.
And it makes sense. I mean, if you're a kid and you want to eventually get to the next level, I mean, it's understandable why so many kids go to the SEC. I mean, that's a great stats act that you just brought us there. They get kids to the next level. And yeah, the SEC is definitely one of the better conferences in college football. That goes without saying. So, obviously to start off, Alabama, they're ranked number 1 in the country for a reason. A lot of people think they're the best team in college football. Another team that just loses tons of talent year after year after year. But again, they recruit at such a high level that it's really not that big of a deal because they simply just reload. And that should probably be the same for this year as well. They're definitely going to be there. I mean, they bring their quarterback again, which is big. They bring back Jalen Hurts, returning starter from last year. He was a freshman. He'll be more experienced this year, which will help. And they have a lot of guys. Most importantly, I love Calvin Ridley. I love what he does at the wide receiver position. He's fantastic. And then the defense, year after year, just continues to turn out NFL talent.
This team is loaded with NFL prospects.
Yep.
I was so impressed looking through their roster. You mentioned Ridley. He's a guy I've loved what I've seen from him. He could potentially be a top 10 pick. Minkah Fitzpatrick is another one at the cornerback position, highly ranked, probably going to be a top 15 pick. They have 3 guys in their secondary. 3 guys that are probably going to be first-round picks, maybe second-round picks. With Fitzpatrick, they've got Ronnie Harrison and Tony Brown there. They've also got Deron Payne at defensive tackle and Bo Scarborough at running back. That could be first-round picks, second or early second-round picks. So that's a wild amount of NFL prospects. If you are not interested in college at all and just interested in what's coming up to the NFL, Alabama's a team you've got to watch.
Absolutely.
They're filled with those prospects.
Absolutely. The names you just churned off there is, I mean, that's the same thing every year after year. I mean, they're going to have 5, 6, 7 guys that you have to watch week in and week out. I mean, Scarborough's a beast at running back. He's a huge mammoth of a man. Minka Fitzpatrick, who's actually from the state of New Jersey. I remember when he was coming out of high school. I actually talking to you last week when we were getting ready we were talking about this show on the college football show. I told you to watch his high school highlight tape. It's fantastic, some of the stuff that he did in high school with the ball in his hand. So, yeah, I mean, this team is definitely, they're the number one team in the country for a reason. So, they'll have the target on their chest. Again, Nick Saban will have those guys ready to go. Then you really have to kind of dig down the rankings here a little bit. Alabama is the only top 10 team that the SEC has this year, which is kind of surprising. Usually they have 2-3 teams to start the year ranked inside the top 25. Some teams just might be kind of taking a step back this year. You have to go down to number 12 until you find the next SEC team, which is the Auburn Tigers, who they're an interesting team this year. They bring in Baylor transfer quarterback Jarrett Stidham to be their quarterback this year going forward, a position they've kind of had trouble filling, kind of really since Cam Newton left. I know they had Nick Marshall a few years ago who kind of had a magical season with them, but he was kind of a gimmicky player. So, they expect a lot of big things from Jarrett Stidham this year down in Auburn as they're ranked number 12. And then LSU is ranked 13th right after them. Big change down in Death Valley with, them getting rid of Les Miles last year. Coach O takes over. He's the head coach now permanently. Look, that's another team, Zach, LSU. I mean, you can think about it, too. They go by DBU, the event of defensive backs. I mean, you're a defensive backs guy, you just said. I mean, I'm sure you can name 6, 7, 8 guys in the NFL right now that went to LSU. It's crazy. They're another school that churns out talent year after year.
For sure, and they have another top one this year with Kevin Tolliver, their corner.
Yep.
I'm excited to see what he can do.
Absolutely, and then it's funny because Auburn 12, LSU 13, Georgia ranked 15. So the next 3 teams are ranked within 4 spots of each other. You got the Georgia Bulldogs ranked 15, who I actually like Georgia a little better than I like Auburn and LSU. I like their quarterback position better. Jacob Eason, who was a freshman last year, got a ton of playing time, which cannot be, you can't overlook that. Getting that kid some playing time, he'll be that much better this year. He's a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He expects to take a big step forward this year. And then the great thing, they have the running back duo of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel to really lean on and take some pressure off of Jacob Eason. And then, of course, Kirby Smart, their head coach, he's a defensive-minded guy. They'll have a good defense yet again. I'm actually really high on Georgia this year. Under Mark Richt, they were kind of the team that was like always the bridesmaid, not the bride. They always got close but couldn't get over the hump. I think they're going to battle Alabama this year to really kind of have a shot at winning the SEC. I really do.
I didn't see them standing out quite like that to me, but I'll be interested to keep an eye on that from what you've said.
Yeah, I think like I said, I just like the quarterback position a little better than that of LSU and Auburn, and the defensive side of the ball is always going to be good with Georgia, especially with Kirby Smart there. So there's definitely some interesting. I mean, those are kind of the top 4 teams in the SEC. Of course, you get down the page a little bit more, you're going to run into Tennessee. They ran out the top 25. Tennessee is. I'm getting kind of annoyed with Tennessee, Zach, to be honest with you. I mean, they're always talked about the last 3-4 years of like, it's going to be, this is the year they take the next step. This is the year they kind of compete. And year after year, they just throw out 9-4, 8-5 records. It's like, I mean, they don't really do much, man.
I'm the same way. I was trying to look for reasons to get excited about them. There's no players that inspire me. It seems like a similar team to what they've always been.
Exactly. I mean, and they lose Josh Dobbs last year. They lost Alvin Kamara, 2 guys that are, Dobbs on the Steelers, Kamara on the Saints now. So, I mean, they lost a lot of talent last year. So, I'm not as high on Tennessee, definitely right now that maybe some other people are. So, as far as some players to keep an eye out in the SEC, Zach touched on a lot, basically Alabama's entire
just watch
team.
Alabama
just
for
watch
sure.
Alabama for sure. Any other guys in this conference, Zach, that jump out to you?
I have LSU's Arden Key. I've
Okay.
seen him come up quite a bit. He's expected to be a top 10 pick, maybe even top 5.
Position?
Defensive end.
There you go.
So he's a guy to keep an eye on. I mentioned Kevin Tolliver on that team as the cornerback as well. Christian Kirk, Texas A&M.
Dynamic player, yeah.
He should be exciting to watch. He should be the reason to watch
Yeah.
Texas A&M this year. And he's a guy that could be a top 10 pick. So I'll be excited to watch those guys for sure.
Christian Kirk's that's a great guy for them to keep their eye on. He's definitely Texas A&M, and look, I watched a decent amount of Texas A&M over the last couple of years. They need to do a better job. Kevin Sumlin needs to do a better job of getting the ball in his hands more too. He definitely did not touch the ball near enough last year down there at College Station with Texas A&M. So he needs to get the ball in Christian Kirk's hands, whether it's screens, whether it's taking a shot down the field, jet sweeps, reverses. I don't care what it is. You got to get the ball in the Christian Kirk's hands. You're right. He's a dynamic player. A couple other guys for everyone to kind of keep their eye on this year in the SEC. Jacob Eason I talked about with Georgia, their quarterback. Jalen Hurts for Alabama is their quarterback. I'm more just interested to see, does he take a step forward or does he kind of just plateau and stay the same as he was last year, because he really struggled to throw the ball down the field last year for Alabama. So I want to see how the offseason improved with that aspect of the game. And then LSU running back Darius Geis, who is a monster. This dude is huge and may actually make some people down in Death Valley forget about Leonard Fournette. A lot of people and a lot of reports are saying that this kid is that good. So he's another guy to keep your eye on.
And he is another NFL prospect too there. So he could go towards the end of the first round is what I was seeing, maybe more like the second round.
Absolutely. So I would say that and we didn't do it for the Big Ten, but just real quickly, we'll digress here quickly. My Big Ten championship game was actually Ohio State taking on Wisconsin. Ohio State coming out of the East, Wisconsin coming out of the West there. Did you want to give a pick for the Big Ten title game of teams to get to the Big Ten title game? It seems like you liked Ohio State as well.
I agree. Those were definitely my top two teams. Like I said at the beginning, I don't have as much experience when it comes to knowing the teams as well. I've been more focused on the players, but those two teams definitely stood out on each side.
Sure. SEC, I'm going to go with I want to throw Georgia in there, but I don't think they're going to have enough quite this year to get past Alabama. So I'm going to have Alabama taking on Florida again, because Florida seems to be the only team in the SEC East that really does anything, because the SEC East is an absolute joke. It really doesn't have any team. It's kind of like it's just like the Big Ten West. I mean, you have like one, maybe two teams there. Other than that, it's pretty much a given that said team is going to get to the conference title game. They really need to do a better job of getting some parity there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who they're going to face there. Alabama is so much better.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. It doesn't matter who they face. Alabama should definitely get to or win the SEC, and then obviously would put them in the college football playoffs. So now we're going to move on, Zach, to the Big 12 Conference, also known as the We Don't Play Defense Conference. This conference is all about offense, offense, offense. That's what I have written down on my paper here. Offense, offense, offense. That's what this conference does. They refuse to play defense, and it's not that they even refuse to play defense. It's just difficult to play defense in this conference. You have the air raid offense, spread. I mean, these offenses spread teams out, and they just make it difficult to play defense in this conference. They have a lot of big name players to look at, which we'll get to later on. To me, though, this is a two-team race, and it's two teams from the state of Oklahoma. It's the University of Oklahoma, and it's the Oklahoma State Cowboys that really stand out to me this year. Oklahoma comes into this year ranked 7th, while Oklahoma State rounds out the top 10. So two top 10 teams that are going to go at it here in the Big 12 Conference, and two teams who are very exciting to watch offensively.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's kind of like you were saying, because of the defense, I'm just not that excited about this conference this year. Those top two teams easily stand above everyone else, and then it's just there's not the excitement when it comes to individual players like some of the other conferences. So I don't see myself watching many games from this conference.
That's kind of surprising, because I think, look, if you're a person out there listening and you like games that are 59-59, and this is the conference for you. I mean, you're going to see teams score into the 50s, into the 60s on a weekly basis. It's just going to happen. So, if you're...
And that is exciting if you're constantly into that type of football. I like checking into it. It's fun from time to time to see games like that, but they're not going to stand up to some of these other top teams that are going to have the best players around that are heading to the NFL. I just don't see that kind of that kind of excitement.
And Zach makes a great point there as far as stacking Big 12 teams up to other teams. I mean, there's a reason that no Big 12 team has yet to make the college football playoff. One, it's because they haven't had a Big 12 championship game yet, which they will have this year. But I just think the committee and the upper echelon NCAA, folks, they just don't think that these teams and the lack of defense they play will hurt them against teams like Alabama, Ohio State, the Clemsons last year. I mean, I think there's a reason why none of these Big 12 teams have made the college football playoff yet.
Yeah, and the best prospect from this group is Connor Williams, the tackle out of Texas. And I have a huge respect for him. I'm not tuning into a game to see a tackle play.
No, you're not going to do that, right? Absolutely. I don't know many people that would do that. Hey, Zach. Hey, check out Texas this weekend. They got a kid I really like. Oh, yeah, who's that? Well, their offensive tackle is fantastic. Look at the way he pass blocks. His pass setting is great. Pad level is fantastic. I'm all right, man.
Someone aspiring to be a tackle, maybe.
Right.
But yeah, most people aren't tuning in for that.
Right.
I am intrigued to see the combination at Oklahoma State with Mason
Yes.
Rudolph throwing to James Washington. Both of those guys could be higher picks. So I might tune in for one of their games, but mostly I'm leaving this conference out.
Yeah, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, we talked on, they do have some weapons. You talked about the wide receiver quarterback duo there with Washington and Rudolph. Oklahoma has, they have their boy at quarterback coming back. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Baker Mayfield, there it is. Baker Mayfield comes back. A lot of people think he's a Heisman candidate. To me, Oklahoma, I think a lot of people are really overlooking the fact that Oklahoma has to replace Bob Stoops this year. Bob Stoops was the winningest football coach in college football before he retired. Okay, and this is a guy that year in and year out was competitive in college football, but at the same time, the last, I forget the exact number, it was like 3 years. Oklahoma has had at least 2 losses. Now people are saying, okay, this great coach is leaving, yet they're going to take a step forward? Like, to me, that just doesn't make sense. And you have a young coach coming in here with not a lot of experience to all of a sudden is going to make this team vie for the college football playoff. To me, that's like 1 + 1 = 4. It just doesn't make sense. Like, so for me, that's why I have Oklahoma State actually winning this conference, coming out on top, and I just think their head coach Mike Gundy is fantastic. Listen to some of his press conferences. He's paid his dues. He's been there over a decade. I think it's his time, and with the combination of offensive playmakers that they have, I think it's time that Oklahoma State gets their turn here.
And I'm in agreement on Oklahoma State being at the top as well. I think in an offensive conference, they have the best quarterback. Right. And the best receiver. And that combination puts them ahead of everyone else.
Right. And let's not forget about the running back, Justice Hill, who a lot of people don't really talk about their running attack. Rightfully so. They do throw the ball quite a bit. But Justice Hill gives them a great dynamic back out of the backfield. So, I mean, at every position on offense, for the most part, I mean, this team is loaded, and they're going to score some points. So, it's definitely a possibility, too, that we see Oklahoma. Oklahoma has to travel to Oklahoma State in the regular season. We also might see that matchup again in the Big 12 championship. Real quickly, Zach, a team I do want to just touch on here quickly is the University of Texas. We talked about they are starting the year ranked 23rd in the country. I thought that was ridiculous that they are ranked that high, or at least ranked to start the year after this team was just 5-7 last year. Any idea why they are ranked so high? Is it the name? Is it the brand Texas that does that? Or is it just such high expectations down there in Austin?
I'm certain that factors in the brand, who they are, where it's located, like that being a football area.
Right.
I don't see it either. I'm down on this whole conference, as I've said over and over again.
You really are.
But specifically, yeah, I just don't see it from Texas this year. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to see them prove me wrong, and be a fun team, and be a team I have to tune into every week because they're exciting and they're talented. And this conference is better than I thought. I just don't see that happening.
Look, I'm not saying Texas is going to go 5-7, 6-6 again.
No,
I'm not saying that. They're going to be drastically improved. I mean, really going to be an improved ball club. I mean, Tom Herman is a very good coach. I mean, went from Ohio State, running a very good offense there, goes to Houston, takes that program to levels they had never reached. Now he's going to go to Texas and should do the same thing to turn around the mess that Charlie Strong got this program into down in Texas. So I'm not saying that they're going to be bad this year. I just think people kind of need to pump the brakes a little bit with Texas to start the year. I mean, this is a team that I definitely think will make some noise, but I just don't think they're ready yet to compete with Oklahoma or Oklahoma State this year. So give the guys some players and some teams to keep an eye on this year, Zach, other than the guys you mentioned already.
So I did mention a couple of my favorites there with Mason Rudolph, quarterback Oklahoma State, and then James Washington. Both of those could be first-round picks. Connor Williams is the best prospect, the tackle out of Texas. And then two other guys to add. Malik Jefferson, the linebacker from Texas. He's projected to be a first-round pick. And then Jordan Thomas, the cornerback at Oklahoma. It's always
Good
interesting
player,
seeing how someone does playing against top offenses. Like they do have to do, but he's projected as a high second-round pick. Obviously, if he steps his game up even more, could move into the first round. So he'll be a guy that would be worth watching for sure.
It's funny, we just spent the last 2 minutes bashing Texas, but I'll give you a guy from Texas to keep an eye on. Their quarterback, Shane Buechele, who comes back, has a lot of experience, and many people think can take the next step. He's a gunslinger, loves to throw the ball around the field. If you like Texas and you want to tune into them, he's the guy that you want to keep an eye on. Is quarterback Shane Buechele down there for the University of Texas. So the Big 12, like I said, I think it's definitely going to be Oklahoma and Oklahoma State's conference to lose. And it's going to be interesting. I really hope we get to see that being the Big 12 championship game. I think that would be really an exciting ball game. So next, we're going to transition to the ACC, the conference that gave us the national champion last year with the Clemson Tigers. They got revenge against the Alabama Crimson Tide last year in a fantastic ball game that came down to the last play of the game where Deshaun Watson finds wide receiver in the corner of the end zone, and they get over the hurdle and they bring a national championship to Death Valley there at the University of Clemson. And that's where I'm going to start with this conference, Zach, is Clemson. They lose a lot, man. I mean, they lose Deshaun Watson, their quarterback. They lose Wayne Gallman, their running back. They lose two wide receivers in Mike Williams, Artavius Scott. They lose their tight end, Jordan Leggett. I mean, they lose a lot of talent. They also lose some guys on the defensive side of the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see how well they can reload. Are they going to be able to reload like Ohio State, like Alabama, or is this going to be a transition year for them where we do see this team lose 3 games, maybe even 4 if someone upsets them? Where do you kind of see them falling in? Do you think this is a team that can not miss a beat and can compete for in getting to the college football playoff this year, or do you think they are going to kind of take a step back this year?
I think it is so tough losing some of those top-end talent players like they did. And they've done well to fill some of those holes, but not to the level of some of those other top teams. And I definitely think they do drop off from where they've been. Although they do have some good prospects, they have some good players, it's just not going to be on the same level at all.
Absolutely. Zach, you 100%. Look, you came out and said that your knowledge for NFL is higher than that of NCAA, but you hit the nail right on the head with Clemson. I'm glad that's the direction you went there, because I'm in the same boat here. I think this is a 3, and barring a crazy upset, possibly a 4-loss team. I know 4 losses is probably a little high, but definitely 2 or 3 losses for Clemson this year. I think the fact that not even just the players I talked about, just focusing on Deshaun Watson, what he meant for Clemson last year. I mean, he was everything for this team. And let's not forget, this is a team that lost to Pittsburgh, could have lost to NC State, struggled with Troy, for goodness sake. I mean, this was a team that really had to scratch and claw and be really fortunate to win some of these close games last year, ultimately because Deshaun Watson pulled a rabbit out of his hat and was fortunate enough to get them wins and get them to the college football playoff and ultimately win a national championship. I think that's a tall task for these kids that are replacing these guys to go out and do that. Look, they're talented. They recruit well every year. I get that. But it's the talent gap from these guys to the guys that they were replacing. I think it's going to take a year for them to be able to compete for a college football championship again. I think Clemson is going to take a step back this year. And look, they're ranked 5th to start the year simply for the fact that they were national champions last year. That's going to be difficult. They actually start the year, if I'm not mistaken, against Ole Miss, I believe. And I actually have Ole Miss winning that game. I actually think Clemson's going to lose their first game. They're going to struggle because ultimately because of the quarterback position. I think the quarterback position, or maybe it's Auburn they play. I think it's Auburn. I stand corrected. It's Auburn. It is Auburn. I actually have Auburn winning that game basically for the fact that I'm going to take Jarrett Stidham over whatever quarterback Clemson decides to go with. So I think Clemson takes a step back this year, and Zach, you're in agreement as well.
I definitely am.
Next team we're going to talk about is the team that many people do expect to win this conference. Many people expect to possibly win the national championship in college football. That's the Florida State Seminoles. This team has huge expectations. They start the year ranked 3rd, bring a lot of talent back. Bring back their starting quarterback, DeAndre Francois, who was a freshman last year, got a lot of talent. Took a beating last year, too, man. If you watch some of his tape, go back, watch some of them Florida State games last year, man, you're going to be impressed with the toughness of this kid because he really took some beatings in some of them games last year. So, plus they bring back Derwin James, who I'll let you talk about here in a second. He was hurt last year. I know you're really high on him. So, yeah, they bring back some really key players here. Tell us about some Florida State guys here, Zach.
So you mentioned it with Derwin James. I'm a big secondary guy. Love watching guys that are talented play that position. And he's one of the top ones that's going to be in this upcoming draft class. He's probably going to be a top 15 pick, as well as one of their corners is on the side of the ball, Tavares McFadden. He's very talented as well, so that's going to be a strong secondary for sure. They've got a high quality linebacker in Josh Sweat there. He could be a first round pick.
Great player.
First round pick. And then they've also got a talented defensive tackle with Derek Nandi, who's looking to be a second-round pick. So their defense should definitely be strong. And this is a team I'm tuning to watch, for sure. I especially those secondary guys on their own, they would make it worth it for me to watch them play.
And you don't have to wait too long to tune in to watch Florida State, Zach. They actually open up the year against the University of Alabama to open the year. That'll be the primetime game actually in 6 days when we open up the week 1 of the college football season. It'll be Saturday night. It'll be Florida State against Alabama, which is the marquee game of the weekend, which I'm sure everyone will be tuning into. I'll be watching it.
Yeah, I'll have to catch that one.
You have to at least catch some of it for sure. Even if you have a busy schedule, you definitely have to catch some of that game. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. So a few more teams, actually. The ACC is another conference where a lot of people are high on this year, and rightfully so. They do have a lot of talent down there. In the Coastal Division, it's really Miami or Virginia Tech. Your local squad down there in Virginia that's going to battle it out to get to the ACC title game. These two teams are very similar, very defensive driven, some playmakers on offense, but the quarterback position for each team is very up in the air. I think whatever team can play the best defense and actually get the better quarterback play will ultimately win this side of the division and get to the ACC title game. You have Miami ranked 18th and you have Vatech ranked 21st. So the NCAA thinks these two teams are very similar. Obviously, you can tell by their records. So it's going to be interesting to see where those two teams go. You have any guys from those teams that for us to keep an eye on at all?
Those teams, there's no specific individuals that really stood out to me. I'm excited for the teams to see what they end up doing. But there's not anyone that I was finding at this stage.
I'll give you one for you to watch, Zach. Running back Mark Walton for the Miami Hurricanes is a special back. He kind of split carries last year with Joseph Yearby. He's the guy this year that they should lean on, and I think he'll lean on him a lot early until their quarterback situation gets figured out and gets some experience under their belt. So keep an eye out for Mark Walton.
I'll make sure I do that.
Last team, Louisville, who brings back obviously Lamar Jackson, the Heisman Trophy winner from last year. If you want to watch an exciting player, tune into Louisville and watch Lamar Jackson. What he does in the ball in his hands, he did it last year to start the year, open a lot of people's eyes, and he even did it against some of the better teams in the conference, against Florida State, against Clemson, albeit in a losing effort, still put up tremendous numbers there. So Lamar Jackson, he's a guy you watched last year, correct?
Oh, yeah. And this team's got one guy on each side of the ball that I'm really excited to watch and make this team worth watching. So you mentioned Lamar Jackson, such an exciting player at the quarterback position. He's going to be a first-round pick, probably even a high first-round pick with some of those quarterback-needy teams out there in the NFL. And then at cornerback position, they've got Jair Alexander. I was watching some of his highlights this morning. Ooh, I am excited for him. He is quite the athlete. Got a lot of speed to him. He plays that position really well. So this is a team I will definitely be watching just based on those two guys alone.
Is he one of your higher ranked quarterbacks? One of the higher guys you get excited about this year in Alexander for Louisville?
I am excited for him. I love how he plays the game. He's one that stood out more how he plays. He's not ranked as high as some of those other cornerbacks that have come up. He's supposed to be more of a second round pick, maybe even a lower second round pick. But I love what I've seen from him.
Sure.
He's just such a good athlete. He makes plays. I'm very excited to see what he can do, and if he can take a step forward and become more of a first round pick, one of those top end corners.
And that's the thing. Maybe he helps himself this year and elevates his game a little bit more and does kind of push himself up into the first round of the draft next year. He can absolutely do that. So last team really quickly I want to talk about is NC State. I talked about Northwestern, a team in the Big Ten that could surprise. I think NC State's a team people to keep their eye on. Look, this is a team that should have went in to Clemson last year and beat Clemson. If it wasn't for their kicking woes and some of the fluky things that happened in that game, they would have won. They would have knocked off Clemson. This team returns a lot of people this year. Quarterback Ryan Lindley should have another solid year this year. So I look for NC State to surprise some teams in the ACC. They will get a pretty decent sized upset this year. They're gonna knock off someone. Look, this team had 26 votes to get into the top 25 to start the year. So I don't think it's gonna be too long if kind of things go their way for them to get into the rankings here. So NC State, a team that I want people to keep their eye on. So when it comes to the title game, I'm gonna go with Florida State, and I'm gonna put in. I hate to do it to you, man, but I'm going to put in Miami there. I think Miami just has a little bit more weapons offensively, and I talked about Mark Walton. I think they lean on him, and defensively they're very, very good. I think slightly better than Virginia Tech. So I'm going to put Florida State against Miami, a big rivalry there in the ACC title game. They will play in the regular season, and then they'll face again in the ACC championship game.
I think that'd be a fun game to watch, but I've still got Florida State and Virginia Tech. I'd love to see them make it there. Sure. I know it's a little bit of a homer pick there for me, but I'm perfectly fine with that.
Nothing wrong with that as well, for sure. And look, we talked about a lot of players here, so we're not going to even.
What? I got a couple more to add real quick.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
A safety out of Pitt, Jordan Whitehead. He's definitely looked good. He's a good player. Could be close to the first round, maybe second round pick. And then Bradley Chubb at NC State. He's a defensive end. I've seen pretty consistently he'll be a late first round pick. So those guys will be interesting to watch. And of course, like I mentioned, that Florida State secondary. Gotta keep them watched every time you're tuning in on a Saturday.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Zach. Definitely some guys we're definitely going to keep our eyes on for sure. Last conference, Zach, here that we're going to talk about is the Pac-12. Now, with the Pac-12 is an interesting one here. So you have a couple teams that really kind of stand out. There's a lot of talent all over the place as far as players go. Yeah. We'll talk about that. You have USC, and then you have the University of Washington. USC starts the year ranked 4th, and Washington, they start the year ranked 8th. So you have two teams inside the top 8 to start the year there. USC, obviously led by Sam Darnold, highly sought after a prospect coming out of high school. He has a big freshman year last year, leads them to a Rose Bowl title. And then University of Washington, look, they went to the college football playoff last year. They lost a lot to the NFL. It's going to be interesting to see how they kind of replace some of the players there that they have to replace. They do bring back their quarterback Jake Browning, which will help. But who do you like? Who do you like more here? Do you like USC, or do you fall in love with the Washington Huskies here?
I definitely like USC. They've got some good players on both sides of the ball. Sam Darnold, I'm sure most of you have heard, he's the reason the Jets are going 0-16 this year in the NFL.
Right.
They'd love to get him. So I'm excited. He's a player I haven't watched it all yet, so I'm excited to get to see him play and see what he looks like this season. So I'll be tuning into that. But on the defensive side of the ball, they've got some quality players too, with Iman Marshall at the cornerback position.
Yep.
They've got Cameron Smith, a very talented linebacker that looks like he could potentially be a first-round pick. And then I've got Porter Gustin as a pass rusher. He's supposed to be a second-round pick out of USC. So I'm excited about those guys, and I think they have the most depth on both offense and defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with you. I think Washington just loses a little too much there to kind of get back to the college football playoff where they were last year. Look, they're going to have a nice year. Browning should have a nice year, but I just think they lose a little too much. And USC, look, they do bring a lot back as well as return have a favorable schedule to go with that. Iman Marshall is a guy that I actually followed a lot coming out of out of high school. He's from California. Was a guy, he goes by Biggie as his as his nickname. He had some interest in Michigan for a while there. So that's a guy that I followed for a while. He should be able to take a big step forward this year and kind of cement himself as one of the top corners, I think, in college football. So some of the other teams that fall in line, Zach, after the top two in the conference there, you look at Stanford, they're always competitive. I just mentioned at the beginning of the show, they won last night by, I think, like 60 or 70 points against Rice. So, look, they just keep the train rolling there. David Shaw, what he's doing is fantastic. A statement that I'm going to make, a bold statement that I'm going to make, a team that I'm sick and tired of, a coach I'm sick and tired of, and I think he finally gets fired, and he needs to do something else. I think he needs to either go back to the NFL or do something, and that's Jim Moore. I think gets fired at UCLA. Really just underachieving there with the way that he can get some of these recruits from the West Coast and some of these fast kids. I mean, and he has Josh Rosen right now. Like, if he doesn't have a big year, which I don't think they're going to, I just think the talent around Josh Rosen is pretty lackluster. I think he's going to get fired. So I think this is Moore's last year at UCLA. So I think he's gone after this year.
That will be interesting to see because he has such a talented quarterback with Josh Rosen, who's projected to possibly even be in the top 5, but definitely a first-round pick. And then there isn't much around that. I was trying to find anybody that really stood out, and that might be a team that's tough to watch. I don't see them really doing anything to push themselves significantly forward.
Fun team to watch, though, going forward in this conference is Oregon. I mean, of course, Oregon, a team that, going back to the Chip Kelly days, obviously a team that people think about with offense. That's kind of the same case this year. They returned one of my favorite players in college football in Royce Freeman. He's a guy that I've watched for the last handful of years since he started as a freshman with the Ducks and should have another big year this year. So they bring in Willie Taggart as their new head coach. He's a fantastic guy. I think he's actually going to get Oregon back to the level that Chip Kelly had them in here in a couple years, to where they're competing for championships. I don't think it's going to take them too long to get back to that point. It's going to be interesting to see how he develops the defensive side of the ball, because obviously since Chip Kelly has left, they've really struggled defensively. So Oregon's a team offensively you have to watch, right, year in and year out.
Absolutely, and I'm in full agreement with Royce Freeman. He's a guy I had down for sure that I want to watch this year. And that team's always fun to watch. No matter what, I've always enjoyed watching them play.
Yeah, I mean, they run the spread, they run the read option, all that kind of stuff, get their players in space. And, I mean, you can think back of some of the former players that they had. I mean, the DeAnthony Thomases, who else did they have there? Some really speed guys there. I mean, he's the one that LaMichael James. They really had some fast, some quick players there, some dynamic playmakers there at Oregon. So, yeah. With this conference, though, like I said, it comes down to USC or it comes down to Washington. I like USC. Look, traditionally, when USC is ranked this high, though, Zach, statistics show when they're ranked this high, they don't live up to the expectations. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can live up to those expectations. I like Darnold. I like some of the guys they have around them. Clay Helton as a head coach, not bad. I'm kind of stagnant on him. I don't love him. I don't hate him. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can live up to the hype. So I'm going to take a flyer and say USC does win this conference. But
that's taking a flyer to you.
Well, I mean, no, not taking. I guess that was a bad choice of words.
I had them as my pick too.
That's a bad choice of words. But I'm just gonna I'll take USC with the Pac-12.
I thought you were gonna surprise me.
No, I know I totally screwed that up. I apologize. But you talked about the Big 12 is a conference you could care less about. This is the conference I could care less about, man. Which is weird because they have a lot of, and I actually wrote a lot of players down to watch, and a lot of players going forward that are exciting players to watch this year, and then transitioning into the NFL game. But I mean, when I see like Washington and Stanford, UCLA, those kind of teams, I mean, I just don't get excited. Utah, I just don't get excited watching them teams. The only team I really get excited about watching in this conference would be USC or Oregon. Those are the only two teams I really would get excited about. So, other players for us to keep an eye on here, Zach?
So I've got one more with USC. I ran through a lot of their defense and obviously Sam Darnold, but Ronald Jones, the running back, he's definitely a talented guy. Should be drafted coming up here as a high pick. So That'll be interesting to see. Washington's got an offensive tackle that could be a top 10 pick in Trey Adams. He's a guy I've heard great things about. I don't know the offensive line position that well that I can watch it and know that, but I've read a lot of great things about him. And then their receiver as well, Dante Pettis, is supposed to be very good and projected as a second-round pick. So those are some of the ones that really stood out to me throughout the rest of this conference.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a conference with some bigger names. But like I said, a conference that I'm really not excited about, and a conference that I really don't sit down and watch start to finish certain ball games. So, look, that's it. That's the Power 5 conferences there. We broke down, each one. We gave our picks on who we thought would win each conference, and look, we threw out some players for you guys to keep your eye on here for the upcoming college football season, which got underway yesterday. There were some games that started yesterday. Nothing very exciting. Some kind of low-key games there, but like I said, come Thursday night, you'll see Ohio State play, and then of course Saturday is the big slate of games that will get started. So look, like you said, Zach, I love college football, man. It's definitely something that as I've gotten older and older and older, I've gravitated more towards. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Michigan's going to do this year, how big of a step forward they can take, if any. So I'm excited. Any other thing you want to add here for college football?
I'm excited for this year too. College football, like I've said throughout this podcast, is something I haven't got into as much. But looking through, there's a good 4 to 5 teams that I'm very excited about, and I will make 100% sure I watch them throughout the year. There's another 3 to 4 teams beyond that I'm most likely going to figure out a way to get to see. Those are some of the teams I mentioned with some specific players, kind of like a Louisville, that have 1 or 2 players that I've really liked, that I really am excited to watch. So I'll be watching a lot more college football coming up this year as we go forward, and I'm excited for that, to get a little more into it.
All right, awesome, fantastic. 2 more things I want to do here. I want to give our college football playoff picks. So I want to pick the 4 teams that you think are going to get to the college football playoff. I'll give you a time to quick think about that if you haven't got your top 4 here together. I'll give my 4. I'm going to go with, I hate to do it, but they're so talented. Ohio State, I think, gets there with the guys that they bring back and some of the new guys they'll insert there. And most importantly, they do have JT Barrett back. So when you do kind of just have to kind of shuffle in talent year after year, at least you have a mainstay at the quarterback position. So I'll go with Ohio State. I'll throw Alabama in there. I mean, it would be stupid not to. They're in there by default. Florida State, I just think the conference sets up nice for them to win. I don't think they're going to have to worry about Clemson. And then Louisville shouldn't be much for them to worry about as well. So I think they'll get there as well. And then my surprise team, I think we talked about the Big 12 hadn't had a team get to the get to the college football playoff. I think that changes this year. I think Oklahoma State gets to the college football playoff on the arm of Mason Rudolph. And I think they have a big year and continue it into the college football playoff. So I'm going to go with Bama, Ohio State, Florida State, and then I'm going to go with Oklahoma State as my fourth team into the college football playoff.
It's very interesting with that Oklahoma State call. I might have to check them out this year.
Last year, Washington was one of those teams. A couple years ago, Ohio State stuck in there. There's always like that wild card team that sneaks in there. So
I'm gonna keep it pretty basic on my picks. I went through some of the teams I am really excited about, and I'm going to say those are the teams that make it. So I've still got Florida State, I've got Ohio State, I've got Alabama, and then USC is my fourth.
Wow. I'll put it this way. If that happens, because that would mean that the top 4 teams to start the year
that would be crazy. But I love those teams.
Look, I can see it happening because the teams are so talented, but history tells us that that's not going to happen. But if that happens, man, I'll be really surprised. But I think we are in agreement that if it does happen, people would be excited because those are 4 really talented teams.
It'd be exciting. And I feel like they stand a good bit above the other teams.
Sure.
Every year in every sport, you see it work out. I would be amazed if it actually works out that perfectly.
Right.
But I just don't have another team I feel as excited to put in there. So I'm still going with those 4 teams.
That's fine. Yep. So I gave my 5. You gave your 4. It's going to be interesting to see how things work out here for college football. Fantastic. Look, if you're like me, obviously you're excited to watch college football. If you're kind of more in the wavelength with Zach, take what we talked about here, and I'm not asking you to sit down from 12 to 10 o'clock on Saturdays and watch college football.
I won't be doing that.
No, exactly. Just pick a couple teams.
Got life to live.
Exactly. Pick a couple teams here and there. You want to keep an eye on it and start it that way, so that maybe you can kind of gravitate yourself into watching a little bit more college football. So, fantastic stuff, Zach. As we do always on this podcast, we'll end things with our final thought. I have a final thought. You want me to go ahead and do this? So last night we were over at a friend's house, and a bunch of us got together and watched the Floyd Mayweather Conor.
That's exactly what I had on my mind.
Conor McGregor fight. I mean, it only makes sense that we talk about it. I mean, that was headlining the news this weekend. So, like I said, we were at a little get together last night. Had the cops called on us actually, which was interesting. So, I mean, very interesting night last night. But I digress. So, with the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather fight, I just want to talk about that briefly. On the surface, I think it was a fantastic fight. I mean, I think Zach's over here laughing.
Had the cops called on us.
We did. We did.
I mean, we have a loud group of friends.
That's the thing. Look, as you can tell, Zach and I are pretty loud people. I mean, our voice, it's not hard to hear us, and that goes with a lot of our friends. So we were outside kind of talking and just telling stories and bullshitting, and yeah, it's a unhappy neighbor called the cops on us, and they just asked us to keep it down if we could go inside, and we said sure. So so I digress. And with the fight, I think people got their money's worth. I mean, I think the fight lived up to it. I think Conor McGregor surprised some people, showed that he could box, showed that he could give Floyd Mayweather a good fight. And look, I thought it was kind of there for him to potentially have a chance to win. I mean, obviously it didn't go his way, but I thought he fought admirably, and anyone that thinks otherwise is mistaken. And I think you have to tip your hat to Conor McGregor, correct?
I'd fully agree with you, and I'm not a fan of boxing. I'm not a fan of UFC.
I hate boxing.
I'm okay with each of those sports. I'll watch them in groups of friends, like we did last night. Meet up with a bunch of our friends from high school, and that's a perfect setting. But on my own, if I was just sitting at home, I would never choose that by myself. But I was still entertained. It was a fun fight to watch. There were some parts where it felt like they were just clinching each other, and it got a little bit slowed down. And you could see McGregor getting tired, especially towards the end. But it was still entertaining. It was competitive. I liked how Conor McGregor came out really strong there at the beginning. I also have a huge respect for Mayweather just as an athlete, how he's able to be that patient and take those shots early on and not give up on his play. Like, he knows what he's doing. Yep. He's feeling out Conor McGregor or any opponent he's faced. That's why he's 50-0. Yep. And then he makes his move. Then he attacks. And that's what great athletes do. And I was so impressed at that ability to be patient, to know his own ability, and know when it's the time to just take over and get that win.
And if you listen to Mayweather's post-game interview after the fight was over, while they were still in the ring. That's what he said. The broadcaster asked him, was that your plan to start off kind of slow there? And he said, yeah, that was our plan. He said, look, we knew that McGregor would come at us. We knew that in the UFC, the most he fights is about 25 minutes if a fight goes the distance. He said once he got over 25 minutes, he knew that he would tire, and their plan was 100% accurate. Once he got to round 7, 8, 9, and then ultimately 10, he was gassed, man. He was done, and ultimately Floyd just turned it up a notch and was like, all right, it's time to end this, and he did. So, yeah. I thought people definitely got their money's worth, and I'm glad that it lived up to it. I'm glad that it wasn't a waste like the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight a few years back. Really glad it lived up to the hype, and props to Floyd Mayweather, 50-0, definitely the best fighter of our generation. So.
Yeah, huge respect to both guys, for
Absolutely.
sure.
All right, Zach. Well, that's going to wrap things up. Obviously, a shorter show than weeks past. We're just a little over an hour here, so I thought it was a very good podcast this week for college football. Next week, we're going to transition back to the NFL. We're actually going to preview week 1. So we're going to look at some of the marquee games. We're going to look at the Eagles, look at the Cowboys, who those teams play, and we'll break down the week 1 action from the NFL and keep it going here on another edition of Lifelong Rivals podcast. Any last words here, Jack, before we sign off?
We're excited to keep going forward. We appreciate the people that have subscribed to us on iTunes, on YouTube, the people that have given us compliments that are enjoying the show, and we want to keep hearing your feedback. We love it. Make sure you follow us and let us know anything you're thinking, anything we did good, anything we can improve. Anything like that, we're happy to hear it. We appreciate it, and you're all amazing. Thanks for listening.
Well said, Zach. Well said. Absolutely echo the sentiments fully. So, yeah, keep an eye out for this podcast as we post it, and then keep an eye out for next week as we dive into week 1 of the NFL season. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy your week.